Test. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. All right. Well, I welcome you to Sunday night prayer meeting. It'll go kind of similar to what we did last week, and the week before, and the week, well, maybe the whole month of May. Just kind of do the same thing, leading with a short devotion and encouragement about prayer. And so that's kind of what I'll do is I'll open us up in a way that kind of describes or, encourages our prayer life and strengthen our hearts, hopefully, with a word and then some scripture. And then I'll turn it over to Chris isn't going to be here. Okay. All right. So, yeah, I got my favorite shirt on, and I got a toothache. I've had one for about 2 weeks now. Yeah, but it comes and goes. I think it's actually easing off. It was up here, it felt like, but it's done stopped. So, but anyway, so I want to just kind of bring in a few things here on I'm using my phone, 360 notebook. So my thought is starting this meeting this morning, I wanted to talk about Martin Luther. He's one of my favorite preachers, pastors in the days gone by. He's an old pastor. It was asked to him one time by a friend. He says, how do you, you've got so much to do. How do you got time for prayer? You've got so much to do. When you think about what Martin Luther was doing, a friend was asking him, I see you got responsibilities, so much responsibilities on your shoulders. Like, this is what Martin Luther was doing, He was, he was a preacher, he was a writer, he was a teacher, he was a counselor, and he also faced a lot of opposition against the Catholic Church. And so there was a lot going on in his life, and somebody just blatantly asked, man, how are you able to do it all? And Luther replied, I have so much to do that I shall spend 3 hours. And this is what he says, I'll spend the first 3 hours of my day in prayer. Now, the world would probably think opposite. You and I may say, that's 3 hours I could get a lot done in. Maybe we could pray along the way, or maybe, how about we start out and then we stop and pray. But, Luther realized something that I think we all need to understand. Prayer was not an interruption to the work. That's what I just described, wasn't it? Thinking that if we spend the first 3 hours in prayer and not getting nothing done, it was an interruption to the work. Well, see, Martin Luther thought of it the opposite way. He didn't see it as an interruption to the work. He saw it as preparation for the work. And so when you think about his mindset, his daily habit, his character about the attitude towards prayer, it's almost as if he says, man, before you do anything, we should pray. I bet you this church is built on that same principle. If you think about it long enough and hard enough, and if you've gone back far enough in this church, I bet you prayed over there before this place was ever established here. I bet you when that size, there's a picture somewhere in this church where people are standing beside a white bus, not much ground at all, a white church, and a ton of people stacked and standing side by side. I bet you it started with just a few people praying, and then God multiplied, God expanded, God did work. When you think about how the saints here created or thought about how we're going to come up with the funds, where do you think it started? Prayer. But guess what was on, when you think about, well, we need funds. Well, that means, you're already initiating the thought that we need to do work. But guess what the church did? They didn't spend the first 3 hours worrying about work. They prepared the work with prayer. So really, when you think about Martin Luther's principle, isn't really too far off the beaten path for every believer and every Christian that walks this day and time. Prayer needs to be important. And I think, when you think about a small church understanding, we may not have the large budget or many staff members or endless resources, but we have access to what? To the throne of God. You may say we ain't got all these things, but you can't say we don't have that. We've got access to the throne room of God. And so when you think about it, here's a couple of scriptures. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, now this is Jesus saying, what does he say? I love this one. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all other things will be given unto you. When you think about what Mark says in chapter 1, Mark opens up his gospel with a powerful thought. Man, it said here in verse 35, and in the morning, and now in the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, he, that's Jesus, went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed. Those were Mark's words. Those were not Jesus' words. Those were Mark's witness of Jesus. That was Mark studying Jesus. That was Mark realizing when they were camped around and doing one thing to the next, from one day to the next, he heard rustling. He heard a tent door open. He heard something moving. And Mark did what? He stuck his head out and said, who is it? Oh, that's Jesus. Where is he going? He's going to pray. It's 3 a.m. in the morning. He's starting the day with prayer. You ever wonder how maybe Martin Luther actually got a lot done in a day's time? Think about it. You used to work. How did you do your 12-hour days? How did you get up in the middle of the night, answer phone calls, and deal with situations with work and still function? How did you get supper on the table? How did you get the house cleaned up? How did you get the laundry done? How did you do all the day in and day out things with work? How did you pay the bills? And how did you budget this? And how did you handle that situation? And how did everything? I guarantee you, along the way, if you're a believer long enough, you've been praying about a lot of those situations for the strength, for the help, for the understanding, for the guidance, for the direction, for the know-how. And so when you think about it, what's he doing? Martin Luther's really just saying what? He's simply saying, there's a lot of things that I need to accomplish today, God. I've been writing a devotion. I got table talk that needs to be written this week, sent out to print. This is when the printer, what was that? That's called some type of, the first printing press that came out in the 1490s or 80s. It's now Access, and it was the biggest thing in anywhere, because now in 1500, when Martin Luther, you could print anything, and it could be out in the hands of everybody in a matter of moments. And you think about, that was pretty fast, even though it took probably a week to get it done. Today we have the same access. I wrote this devotion right here on my 365, what do you call it? Windows 365, sitting down at my desk and just writing down things, thinking about how I could explain or encourage our hearts with prayer. And just knowing that, I did it in a matter of 30 minutes. And, how do we get things accomplished? Well, we start our day depending on God. And as you need those things throughout your day, guess what happens? What you started with begins to kind of just flush its way out in your system. It's working over here and it's working over there. When you take, I've been taking 4 ibuprofen about every 6 hours. And, I know it's not, it may work immediately, but that ibuprofen actually is working in my system, isn't it? It's helping me. I think it is anyway, maybe not. It's helping me to deal with the pain, but after those 6 hours, you can tell it's done wore off. That's a new day. You done went through your day, and you've been praying, and you've done your things, and now it's done wore off. It's a new day, and now you need to begin with what? Another dose of prayer, another encouragement with prayer, another life of prayer. And so you think about what's going on in those two scriptures. Mark said that's how he begins his day, by getting up earlier before everybody else and spending time with God. Why? Because he knew. He knew the challenges of his ministry. He knew the opposition of the Pharisees. He knew that the 12 disciples were going to be needing something and learning and teaching. He knew that he had to have something to sustain him throughout the day. There was a time in John chapter 3 when, you remember the story of the woman, or 4, John chapter 4, the woman at the well? And, Jesus is there, and then the disciples leave. One of the greatest parts of that whole story is the fact that they came back with food, and he says, I don't want food from you. He says, why? I've been eating already. You're not hungry? Yes, I've been eating spiritual food. I'm not hungry. And I think when you think about prayer as a way to fill our soul and our hearts and our minds and our spirit with the things that we truly need. There is a day coming. If you look at John's writing in Revelations 21, there is a time coming when a new heaven and a new earth arrives. And these bodies that we're talking about that need all the things that they need is departing from us, guess what's going to happen? You ain't going to be in those kind of situations. But I bet you're still going to pray, and you're still going to praise, and you're still going to worship, and you're still going to go to church. Because it's all about God. Whether you're in this flesh or whether you're in that spiritual new body, it's all about God. And so you think about what it is you're preparing yourself with the power of prayer. The power of prayer helps us fight off the world, sin, flesh, and any kind of desire that we love to have thought of. But, it also guides and directs and helps us with, how to deal with things in the world that we are confronted with. The greatest resource that the church has is the presence of God's access through prayer. I think it's Revelations 5, or it's 4 or 5. It says what? The throne room of heaven, the bowl of incense, the prayers that are being lifted up, the aroma that's filling the throne room of God, our prayers. Luther discovered long ago that the busier the work, the greater the need to pray. That's table talk. If you ever want to learn about Luther, you can find a lot about him in Table Talk. It's easy to get access to. It only costs about $10 a month. But that's an idea. And that's where I think in that thought process, that's why he says, I have so much to do that I'll spend the first 3 hours in prayer. A simple way to pray, Luther's own writings on prayer, a wonderful tool. If you just, what I'm giving you here is resources to think about or to consider. And when you think about how it is, and to see how others cope with prayer, how they deal with prayer, how they, do prayer. And so I want to give you, I thought I had something here. I've lost it. So 365, it's gone. Well, I had an outline here that I can't find no more. That's why you don't pin them on your phone to get your work done. Well, in those two things, I had some questions. Why can't I find them? I had it up. I must have turned it off. Oh, well, I apologize. I won't do that again. I thought I was doing something that would help. Let me see. And just as we've always done, I think it's smart to just to consider, Luther's practice. He was preparing himself for the things for his day, just like we are. We're praying this evening. I'm not going to find it, so I'm going to turn it off. And so we've gathered together to accomplish something, right? We don't see the visible, fruit from it, but we know that God is working and He's at hand, and we're just being faithful to the prayer. And so just think about our list real quick. I'll use it, Philip. And we have spiritual needs, physical needs, and we have general requests. Last week we went through this list and just saying names. We speak names. And even on our members list, that we're just saying names out loud, because a lot of times there are names that we need to mention because there's a need for prayer in their lives. We prayed for Mavis a week or two ago because we knew she was traveling. Just something as simple as that. We've been praying for Sue Barfield and Ann. I don't know Ann's last name. Isn't that sad? Oh, it is Barfield. Okay, yeah. And, knowing her name, just a sudden tragic, and things change so in life drastically like that overnight. We've been praying for Dawn. Dawn's situation. And Sue's doing good. I think she's just trying to cope with everything that's going on in her life. And then Ann either had a stroke or had some type of mini strokes. Yeah. So concerned about. So it's just battling with one thing or the next, and to get that abrupt information or something happened like that in such a short period of time has got to be uh, tough to deal with. And so our prayers, you know. Um, and so spiritually needs, we think about Angie Shirley, Amanda Shirley, our graduates that are graduated this year, um, Josh Honeycutt, Steve Gardner's family, Langley family, Taylor family, Kathy family, Gent family, um, Donna Treat. Now, Gent family, I don't know who the Gents are. There's some Gents that live down for me. Taylor family, I don't know who they really are. I'm sure they've been here. I don't know who they are. But what I'm saying, what I'm bringing evidence is that somebody in this church thought it was important to say, hey, put this family on the list because of spiritual needs. And when you think about what spiritual needs are, I was passed a prayer card this morning. And then when I got home, I flipped that prayer card over because I noticed there was some writings on it. And there was questions on there. And spiritual battles kind of questions. Tough questions. And so, I've got that. I got it right here, and I'm gonna hold on to it because I think when you hear things like change seems impossible. Imagine that. Or maybe what fruits do I bear? Honest questions with himself. Bold enough to write them down and then hand them to me. Here's another one. Have I fallen short? And then it says, have faith in Jesus. And it says, you are able, Lord. Do you hear the spiritual struggle going on? And so it was a glimpse, really. It was a short glimpse into someone in this church that's trying to understand what faith is and to deal with the things that, maybe many of the mature Christians have already somehow got a grip on or is, making it or faking it, or, you know. Um, but it sure did put me in a moment to say, Lord, we need to pray. We need to pray for pray for this new family that's coming to our church. Just ask yourself a question. We're talking about spiritual needs. I'm not talking about physical needs or general requests. Spiritual needs. When you're a young Christian and you come into a church, what are your hopes? What are you expecting? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think the church is going to help you help you get over the hurdles and get along the way? I'm asking you that because I think that's important to consider, because some of you have been in the faith for a long time. And you once knew what it was like to have somebody undergird you or walk beside you or just pray for you or just encourage you or just say hey to you or just make you feel a part of something. And so please, every opportunity you get, sow a seed. Add some water. Because God's doing a work. And if we can't be about His business, isn't that what He says? Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. Well, I think that's a good place to see the kingdom of God at work. And some of these names and these families, I don't know. Donna Treat family, the Cook family, we know them. The Coker family, we know them. The Cawthon family, the Hayes family, we know them. America, Israel, Josh Honeycutt, Our Country, Lost Souls, the Happy family, yep, there you go. Starnes family, the Carnes family. Physical needs, Christina Wiles, Christina. Do you guys know Christina? You know her story? You know? Yeah, I know. It's not my story to tell, but it's mine. I know it. It's a difficult situation. And she's here. And she's alone many times. You ever see that? She sits by herself. Maybe she'd be a little upset or uncomfortable if I were to talk about it. But, what I see is someone who would probably love someone to come beside or make a friendship or spend time with or reach out to or ask how you're doing. She's a single mom, not really, but yeah, raising 2 girls in this day and age. Tell me how you do that on an income. It ain't easy. And so, I'm not saying give her money. I'm saying speak to her. Spend some time getting to know her. Anyway, Bristol Coker, Peggy Evans, these are all physical needs. I didn't realize how big a part Peggy Evans had in this church. I didn't know that. I've heard that time and time again from just different folks about different conversations. And I use the term hallway conversations because you just hear things and they're short and they're just, reflections or remembering things that happened, And I thought, wow. She came in this church about a month ago and sat down and played that piano. She did that a month ago before that. And we were trying to get her up, but we were like, no, just let her play. Maybe the last time she gets to play, we don't know. Let her glorify God. Let her reflect on what it, because one day we're going to be, or could be. I sat by Don 2 weeks ago. Call you out, Don. And he said he missed being here. Missed being here. You know what my first thought was? It must be the fellowship. It must be the friends. It must be the memories that he's made here. That makes it so important. I don't know that was my thoughts, physical needs is Jimmy Cooper, Judy Cooper. They're going through a time. Yeah. And the water seems to be high, and the wind seems to be strong, and there seems to be no calmness, but there they are, sitting still, and the anchor still holds. I sat with Jimmy a couple weeks ago right there beside him at the couch. And he talked to me just as like he would, but he had a hard time hearing. And they told me a little bit about their struggles and things that were going on, and I just told them I loved them, and we were here for them, and if they needed anything, and praying for them. Betty Adams, Kay Robinson, Peyton Feld, Pete Dutton. I don't know any of these folks. Jenny Dickinson, Angie Shirley, Jean Todd, I know them. Mahaffey family. Donna Imes, Rick Imes, Beth Gardner, Steve Gardner, Lyndon K. Humphreys, Regina Bowers. You talk about physical needs. I don't know what they are, but I know the one who does. You know the one who does. And so, you know, you don't have to know every little detail. Just enough to say, hey, you know, God see these family. God see this person. God help them through that situation. That's enough. You know, general request, Shirley family, the Ashworth family, the Ackerman family, the Johnson family, Fail family, Madison Johnson, Alvin Robinson, Caitlin Wiles. I think Caitlin is the young lady that Christina's, yeah. Those two have a great personality if you don't know them. They put me in the mind of Pollyanna. You ever seen that movie? Pollyanna? A great movie. They don't make them like that no more. But you don't meet a stranger, talk to you just like you grown up. I don't know if I'm grown up or not. I try to be. But I tell you, when you hear her talk to you, you think, better be careful. This ain't a young lady. This ain't a young girl. This is a young lady. All right, we got Ray family, the Dana Sanders. Dana, been missing her. She's been taking a job on the weekends. And so, you know, sure did miss having her come in with the babies. And, you know, Bobby Sanders, Jordan Small, Todd family, our church, our general request, our church. You know, that's the only place that it's mentioned on this prayer list. Our church. It's not mentioned under spiritual needs. It's not mentioned under the physical needs. You don't think this church has physical problems? Go look at the playground. Try to cut these lights on and off. They got to warm up or something. I'm like, hey, let's get at it, boys. We got to get this thing lit up. You know, there's physical needs. There's things that's got to be done here. And that's what Philip was talking about this morning. And so when the building has physical needs, it needs what? Physical hands and feet and people who are willing to devote, donate their time. Vacation Bible School. If you've never been here during Vacation Bible School, let me give you a heads up. It's roughly 60 to 70 kids. Yep. And what I see is a lot of excitement, a lot of energy, and well-mannered, strong teachers. They come in, and they have got it together. They're not pulling their hair out. They're not this. They're not that. And I believe it's because we prayed up about that day's work. Because that day, and the 4 days that we do VBS, which is one of the biggest events for this church, minus the Christmas play, when you get so many people here, the glory of God is at work. The kingdom of God is at work. And so we've got to be about the prayer. If we're not about the prayer, then we're going to be about something. And that seems to me like if you're about something and it ain't prayer, maybe the something ain't what you ought to be something in. I don't know if that sounded right or not, but you get the gist of it. I know normally we read the names and all that, but you know, that's up to Philip if he wants to come down. I'll stand beside you to give you some help. No. They didn't pull their hair out.
I'm going to tell you a story. We had a Bible school. We were working. Well, we from the Bible school to help with Bible school. Well, Debbie was helping with the nursery, or was it nursery? The little ones. And they had taken them out to the fellowship hall and brought them back in. Well, the easiest way to do it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She said, "Where's Lily? Where's we left Lily. Where's Lily?" Who was it that told you? Tara Cook, Jimmy's wife. Terry was in there. She said, "Debbie, she's on your hip." It was the last day. It was tax season. So, yes, the teachers and whoever's going to be here needs prayer. I mean, if we've had senior groups come in and have a Bible study. Well, that's wonderful. You know, we had volunteers teach the Bible study just like they taught in Sunday school to older Christians. Why don't we come in here and pray the whole time for the kids? I mean, you know, it's I ask for things. Somebody says, "Pray for everything. Don't worry about it. Just pray for everything." And I see prayers answered. They're simple prayers. And a lot of people, this story's getting old. But anyway, we were at a campground and we were looking, and sister-in-law was looking for her daughter's earring in a football field. The pool was at the end of it, and the canteen was at the other end of it, and they were out there looking. They looked all over the place. And I finally walked out there and I said, "What are you looking for?" And you tell they were looking. "What are you looking for?" "We're looking for Kayla's earring in a football field." I mean, as big as a football field. It was huge. And it was grassy. And I walked out there, I said, she told me what she's looking for. I said, "Well, you ain't going to find that. That's needle in a haystack. That's an impossibility." So we walked around there a little bit. You know, we were in between things with the kids because we had Bible study with them, and we took them down the river and all this stuff. I said, "You can hang that up. You ain't going to find that. You're not going to find that." So they left. They went up to the canteen. And I was out there by myself. And, you know, I said, "Well," I stopped and I said, "Lord, you know where this thing's at, and I don't." I took tell she's doing a wonderful job.
Yeah.
So we need to back her up. Ann Groves, Dennis Groves, Madison Johnson, Candy Honeycutt.
Well, there's a few of us here, so we mentioned a lot, and I think no matter how many we have here, I think prayer can be heard. So, how about we just this time? How about we bow our head in silence and just lift up some prayer?
Silent prayer.
Yeah, we've walked and prayed, we've held hands and prayed, we've stood and prayed, we've touched one another and prayed. This afternoon, let's sit in silence and pray. Just thinking where you are, heads bowed and eyes closed, the posture or the position that you've taken. Can you picture it? Reality says that we're sitting in a church, sitting in a pew, leaned up against an altar. Our direction is towards the throne room of heaven. Our silent thoughts are not to the world or to those around us, but they are to a heavenly Father. What's being said right now is something only He hears. It's the beauty of silence. So the question is, what do you expect to happen with what you've just prayed for? What do you expect to happen with what you've just prayed for? What's hindering your prayer? Doubt? Lack of trust? Something too small or too large? I want to encourage you to let your faith be encouraged by your prayer. And that prayer and that faith is in God. You're trusting Him with those words, those concerns, those situations, those names. And then I want to say one last thing. Whatever you're praying for, would you consider hearing God say, you're responsible for part of it? And what I mean by that is if your prayer is pointed to someone else or is about someone else, then make it your responsibility to reach out. To tell them, hey, to say, I'm thinking of you. To say, is there something I can do? Because that in itself sometimes is all it needs. We don't know what God is doing or what others are going through, but we do know this. We're called to be missionaries, even if it's our neighbor or a friend. So Lord, we just want to say that I pray that our hearts are right with anybody. If there's any unforgiven moments or with someone, Lord, I pray that that is not something that is hindering our prayer. Secondly, let our prayer develop our obedience. And if, third, you don't know what to pray, well, don't worry. The Bible teaches that the Holy Spirit knows what to say and to ask for. So, Lord, again, thank you for this hour, this appointed time, those who have come and the names that we've mentioned. And, Lord, let our hearts be full of encouragement, and let our days ahead be steps of prayer before anything else. For prayer is truly the preparation to the work that every saint has before them each and every day. Lord, help us. We love you and we thank you. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.